involved or committed? Involved or committed? One day, the chicken was talking to the pig about what a good farmer they had, and that he deserved a good breakfast. We should provide him bacon and eggs. And the pig said, well, you're involved in that, but I'm committed. You know, as long as we don't have to sacrifice, we will follow. We'll be involved. If we can receive some benefits, we'll be involved. We'll follow. But how real committed to the frying pan and the heat are we? Are we? I've been studying some about General Eisenhower. And really the depth of character in many respects he had that I never realized before as he studied and had to lay out the preparation for D-Day. And you probably all know some of the history of D-Day, June 6th of 1944, the Normandy invasion, Project Overlord. But that project was in the working for months and months. And there were so many details of this, and someone had to be able to make the final decision. And that's why they needed a supreme commander of all the Allied forces, which General Eisenhower, later becoming President Eisenhower, was. And they had originally scheduled this invasion for earlier, around June the 4th. But because of weather, and the weather kept coming, and they didn't have the kind of forecasting we have today. It wasn't quite the same science. You didn't have radar weather and things available to them that we have today. But they know if they go very far beyond the date, then the tides are going to be wrong. Everything's not going to work out right. They'll have to wait a whole nother month. Now, very important to the Normandy invasion was an aerial assault that was to occur even as the Normandy invasion was beginning. That they wanted to send in these gliders and paratroopers right behind the German lines to help distract them away from the beaches. But if the weather was a certain way, they realized it would be impossible to put the men where they needed to be, and be impossible for the men to arrive at the places they needed to be. And they would be very much, as it were, sitting ducks for the German artillery and the soldiers. And General Eisenhower had to weigh all this out. What do we do? Do we go without the aerial assault? Do we go with it? Do we change it? And here's what they came to the conclusion. The only way the land invasion is going to succeed is if we have this aerial assault also. It just will not succeed without it. And the men in the best military minds that they had, they estimated there would be 70% casualties among those paratroopers. 70%. Can you imagine that? They're going to be talking to these men, and 7 out of every 10 of them they see they don't expect to live beyond the initial jump, let alone later. But they have to do it. And Eisenhower said it was the most terrible, hardest decision he ever made. Well, the weather broke, and they could go June 6th. They couldn't go before, they didn't think they could go after, but they could go June 6th. So that night before, at 0200 hours, they gave the final go. We're going. No matter what else happens, we're going. And knowing that we're sending all these men off to their death. That's a pretty strong involvement that he had to make. But you know who the committed ones were? They were the ones coming out of those airplanes, dying on those fields. Well, the weather turned in favor of the Allies. And by the time they got to the beaches, the swells that had been 20 and 30 feet were down to normal. And the Operation Overlord was indeed a success. And they only had casualties of about 20%. still a large amount from those paratroopers and glider pilots. But it must have been a terrible thought to send men to war, committing them in something you're involved in. But not one of those generals, not Eisenhower, not de Gaulle, not Montgomery, none of them were on Normandy Beach. Just mostly those privates and corporals and sergeants, a few lieutenants, majors, and colonels, and one lone general. One lone general, one brigadier general, Theodore Roosevelt, the son of President Roosevelt, was on the beach that day. Jesus Christ, he has a D-Day on this earth. And he's coming back again. And he's coming back for a people who are committed, who are really committed, who are willing to go and die for a better cause. Even if we must die, it's for a better cause. And our commitment has to be grounded in Jesus Christ, in a knowledge of His saving power, His divinity and sonship of God. And I believe that if we have that commitment, it will be expressed in both adoration and obedience to Him. Jesus commanded His people. He commanded them to make a commitment. I mentioned President Roosevelt, his son was at D-Day at Normandy. But when Roosevelt was at Kettle Hill and he was leading the Rough Riders and they prepared to charge, he didn't say "forward, men." He said the two words that Jesus said, the two most important words in leadership. He said, "Follow me." He said, "Follow me." In Matthew chapter 4 and verse 19, Jesus says, He said unto them, referring to Peter and Andrew, I believe, He said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Jesus did not say, "If you wish, you may follow me." He didn't say, "If you want to, you can follow me." He didn't say, "If the stock market is agreeable this week, or your job is in line, or if you've got your house finished." He said, "Follow me." The Greek is translated in the parallel passage in Mark as, "Come ye after me." Mark 1:17. Come ye after me. Follow me, come ye after me. In Matthew chapter 9 and verse 9, "And as Jesus passed forth from hence, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the receipt of custom, and he saith unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him." Here, this statement is actually a stronger statement grammatically than the statement earlier when he spoke to the fishermen at the seaside. He's speaking to Matthew now, and he's using, actually, there's different words here, and these words grammatically are said in what is called an imperative mood, meaning that this is imperative, it is necessary. Nowhere in Scripture did Jesus or any prophet say we could be indifferent in this matter. To not choose is to choose to reject Jesus Christ. To not choose to make a commitment, to stay committed, to be committed in the future, is to be indifferent. It may be involved. Oh, I may still attend church. I may still give tithes and offerings to the church. I may still associate with the people of the church. But I may only be involved. Jesus constantly said in the beginning of his ministry and throughout, "Follow me." In John chapter 1 and verse 43, John chapter 1 verse 43, "The day following Jesus would go forth into Galilee and findeth Philip and saith unto him, Follow me. And again, this is an imperative statement in the Greek. He says, follow me. Now, we don't find Jesus today on the dusty roads and streets of Galilee. But I tell you today, Jesus is still saying, follow me. Jesus is calling today. He may be calling the mother rocking a cradle to give her life to Jesus and to raise the next Moses. He's calling to the young man today to be the next John the Baptist. Or he may be calling an atheist, an opponent of the truth, to be the next Saul of Tarsus. Jesus is calling today, follow me. I've told the story before, and I'll just recount a little bit of it again. But one time when I was in college, before I was a Christian, an insult had been made about someone I cared a lot about. And so I went and I found my brother Russ. He's a pretty big guy. I said, come on, Russ, let's go. Let's go. He says, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to go fight. Oh, okay. So as we're going, he said, how many of them are there? I said, there's only 5 of them. And, well, I didn't really tell him everything at first, but I did tell him everything eventually. But friends, Jesus, he spelt out the cost of commitment to him. He didn't hide anything back. He left none to question what following him would entail. Today, the common thought seems to be to make Christianity as watered down as possible so as not to frighten off possible converts. The path of denial is not dealt upon fully or hardly at all. But people, friends, people aren't benefited that way. And Jesus did not preach any such message. And he, I tell you, is our example. One day a man came asking him about eternal life in Matthew chapter 19 and verses 16 through 22. It says, and behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? And he said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. But if thou wilt enter into life, keep the commandments. Let me pause there. Did Jesus say it was necessary to do something to be his disciple? Did he try to make the road easy for this man? He saith unto him, which? Jesus said, Thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And the young man saith unto him, All these things have I kept from my youth up, what lack I yet? Now, it's impossible that he had done this. He hadn't done this. He thought he had, but he hadn't. But he thought he had. He thought he was ready. But Jesus saith unto him, If thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and, what? Follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Jesus was telling this young man, in effect, is, you've got to be willing to give up everything if you're going to be my disciple. He didn't say you might have to give up some things. You're going to have to give up everything, he said. Jesus also said that if we put anyone ahead of him, anyone or anything ahead of him, we are not really his disciple. We might be involved, but we're not committed. In Matthew chapter 10, verses 37 and 38, he said, He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. Last night I had a chance to visit with my daughter Heidi for about an hour, just one-on-one alone. And some of you know a little bit about my life. And I've lost 2 sons to death, and I've lost some other things that were very important to me. And last night I told Heidi, I said, you've got to take care of yourself. You're all I've got left. And I need you. And I do need her. But you know I need Jesus more. I need Jesus more. And you need Jesus more than anyone else in this world, friends. And if you put anyone else ahead of Jesus Christ, you're involved, but you're not committed. You're involved, but not committed. Jesus never promised the life that prosperity preachers present to their congregations. Instead, he presented a life of self-denial. Jesus did not present involvement, he presented commitment. And this means denying of self. In Matthew chapter 16 and verse 24, then said Jesus to his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And he had said that earlier, as we had noted in Matthew chapter 10 also, that we must be willing to take up the cross of self. We must put self upon the cross and let self be crucified. In John chapter 12, in verses 25 and 26, here Jesus says, he that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. Let me pause there. Did Jesus say it was necessary to do something to be his disciple? Did he try to make the road easy for this man? 26, if any man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. Now, how many of us have ever maybe built a house, or bought a car, or did something that took a little bit of foresight, a little bit of planning? You know, before we do certain things, we usually try to figure out, can I afford to do this? Can I afford to do this? And sometimes it's not just simply money. It may be time. Do I have the time to invest in a certain project or activity? And Jesus told a story about this. In Luke chapter 14, verses 28 through 33, Jesus said, for which of you, think about this, make it personal, which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he hath sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he hath laid the foundation, and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build, and was not able to finish. Verse 31. Or what king, going to make war against another king, setteth not down first, and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sendeth an ambassage, and desireth condition of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. I want to tell you, when Eisenhower, Montgomery, and these others were studying about Project Overlord, they were studying this in great detail. Can we do this? Do we have enough men? Will the weather work? Will this cooperate? You have to understand that the Germans had far, far fewer soldiers than the Allies had stationed at those beaches. But their positioning was so overwhelming. They had these machine gun bunkers and pillboxes that were almost impenetrable. And they had an open sight to the beaches. And all they had to do was stand with those machine guns and just keep them moving back and forth as hundreds and thousands of soldiers were coming out of those amphibious crafts, landing crafts. And just, there were whole landing crafts that not one of them made it out. Not one. Every single soldier was killed in that craft before they could even get off. Jesus says, likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. He says, you count the cost. You decide whether you really, really want to follow me or not. In 1 Peter 2:21, he says, for even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps. Great. Let's follow the steps of Jesus. But you see, friends, those steps involve a commitment in every aspect of our lives. We think about, the commitment to suffer hardship, the commitment maybe even to die for the gospel's sake, right? That's part of it. But what about our day-by-day, everyday life? When the neighbor's not so nice to me, am I still going to follow in the footsteps of Jesus at that point in time? When someone takes my parking place as I'm just getting ready to pull in, do I still follow the footsteps of Jesus? Do I still have his example? Now, Jesus, friends, does not force us to be his children. He does not force a desire upon us. He will allow us to reject his magnificent offer to follow him. We can be lost if we choose. And people did. In Luke chapter 9, we read in verse 59. And he said unto another, Follow me. But he saith, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. In verse 61, and another also said, Lord, I will follow thee, but let me first go bid them farewell, which are at home at my house. Didn't seem like an unreasonable offer. Didn't seem like an unreasonable request. But it was. It was because this man really didn't intend to follow Jesus. This was his excuse to not get started. The truth is, though, that though we see the love of God, friends, people turn away from it. But they shouldn't. And if we could just grasp a real view of what God has done for us, a real view of the plan of salvation, friends, it does have a like magnetic pulling attraction to us. Love begets love, and love begets love, and nothing will change us. Nothing will motivate us like the love of God. In the book Steps to Christ, on page 27, we read this, paragraph 1. It is true that men sometimes become ashamed of their sinful ways and give up some of their evil habits before they are conscious that they are being drawn to Christ. But whenever they make an effort to reform from a sincere desire to do right, it is the power of Christ that is drawing them. An influence of which they are unconscious works upon the soul, and the conscience is quickened, and the outward life is amended. And as Christ draws them to look upon his cross, to behold him whom their sins have pierced, the commandment comes home to the conscience. The wickedness of their life, the deep-seated sin of the soul is revealed to them. They begin to comprehend something of the righteousness of Christ and exclaim, what is sin that it should require such a sacrifice for the redemption of its victim? Was all this love, all this suffering, all this humiliation demanded that we should not perish but have everlasting life? And of course the answer is yes. It was demanded. It was necessary. We could not have eternal life without it. But this next paragraph, short but oh so sweet. The sinner may resist this love. You see, she says the sinner is drawn. The sinner is never forced. The sinner is drawn. The sinner may resist this love, may refuse to be drawn to Christ. But if he does not resist, he will be drawn to Jesus. A knowledge of the plan of salvation will lead him to the foot of the cross in repentance for his sins, which have caused the suffering of God's dear Son. Isn't that encouraging? What she is saying in effect is that you have to try to be lost. You have to make an effort to be lost. You make an effort of pushing away and resisting the pleading of the Spirit of God. Otherwise you'll be drawn. And you will accept. Now, beloved, there have always been pseudo-believers, false believers. In John chapter 6 and verse 2, it says, and a great multitude followed him. A great multitude got involved here because they saw his miracles which he did on them that were diseased. Oh, this guy, he's like the best life insurance, health insurance plan you could ever have. So this man Jesus, I mean, he's everything we need in health. We don't need a doctor, we don't need a nurse, we don't need health insurance. We're going to follow him. We're going to become involved because he can heal our diseases. In verse 26, Jesus answered them and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, ye seek me not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves and were filled. Sometimes these are called loaves and fishes Christians, or something like that. People who follow because there's something good to be gotten from it. In Signs of the Times of November 3, 1898, paragraph 3, Christ stated plainly that it was not because these disciples were convinced of his divinity, not because they saw in him the great teacher sent from God, that they sought him. He knew that they did not seek evidence as a means of establishing their faith in him as the sent of God. He said, Verily I say unto you, ye seek me not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves and were filled. If Christ could furnish bread to satisfy their temporal wants, they thought it would be profitable for them to unite with him. In other words, to become involved. But Christ said, Labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. Then said they unto him, What shall we do that we might work the works of God? Jesus answered and said unto them, This is the work of God, that ye believe on him whom he hath sent. And accepting Christ as their personal Savior, they would have everything. In this gift of God, all heaven, with its inexhaustible treasure, was at their command. But I ask you the question, friends, do we accept God because he's like a slot machine or a coin machine or a vending machine that we just happen to have all the tokens we need to get anything of the different categories out of? Or is that a result of our love for him, that he provides for our needs? He does love us and he does take care of us and he provides eternal life for us. Have you thought about it? In other words, do I serve God because of what he gives to me? Jesus laid out the terms of of being disciples very plainly in the 6th chapter of John. He said, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man, drink his blood, you have no life in you. He says, if you don't partake of me fully, you don't get it. And in verse 66 of John 6, it says that from that time, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. They had gotten involved, but they saw that now he's calling for a commitment, and they're not going to be committed, and therefore they're not going to even be involved anymore. They're going to leave him. They had come to a testing truth, and it failed. A testing truth. We all come to testing truths. And when I say a testing truth, I mean a truth or something about God, something about Jesus that will test the very fabric of our experience, whether it's genuine or not. We see this often with the Sabbath. It is a testing truth. When people learn the obligations of the seventh-day Sabbath, and they're convicted in the sense that they know it's right, but they fail to keep it, then they show that they really don't make a commitment. They may want to be involved. They'll come if it's convenient. They'll come when they can. But it tests them. I thought about tithes and offerings too. This does something similar too. But we read that text in Malachi 3 a lot, 10 and 11. He says, Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. Do we do the former just to get the latter? Do we do the tithes and offerings just to get the good things? Or do we do what is right with God because we love him, and then he chooses to bless us? And we can claim that promise later because he's chosen to bless us, but not because we're worthy of it, not because we're good, not because of what we have done. There are people who are quite able to cast a lot into the treasury, and they're just involved. They're not committed. A widow who just had 2 mites was much more committed than many rich people in the day of Jesus who were only involved. The Bible tells us that as Jesus gave his invitation, that there were many people who followed. In Matthew chapter 4, we read verse 19 earlier, but now in verse 20. And they, speaking again of Peter and Andrew, straightway left their nets and followed him. Straightway. That word straightway means immediately. Verse 22. And they, referring to James and John, immediately left the ship and their father and followed him. Jesus gave them the command to follow, and they went too. We read earlier when he gave the command to Matthew, follow me, that says he immediately rose and went. Are we as willing to do this as these ancient fishermen? Oh yes, we might follow him in certain ways. When it's convenient, we are involved with Jesus. But I ask you again, are we willing to be committed and to go all the way with Jesus? Not only in the hard things, but in the little things too. In the little things. Sometimes the bigger decisions are in effect the easier to make because they're so cut and dry. They're so black and white. We know what to do. Sometimes in the littler things, we fail to understand. We fail to look in the mirror and see our own failings and our own failings and issues. Well, I want to tell you what else. I don't believe that we can be closet believers. Do you know what that means? To be a closet believer? You know, you used to hear this expression, so-and-so came out of the closet. He had been maybe gay or something, and then he's made it known. But as Christians, friends, we can't try to hide our faith. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help us at all. In John chapter 12 and verse 42, nevertheless, among the chief rulers also many believed on him. But because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue. Jesus had said things that really cut these people to the heart. He said, you are corrupt. Your whole system is corrupt. And it has to be rebuilt from the ground up. And they didn't like this. And they said, look, this man, he is speaking against us. He's speaking against the holy temple. He's speaking against the holy people. He's an imposter. And he must be left behind. Don't associate with him. This is why Nicodemus, who later did become an open follower of Jesus, at first came out to see Jesus at night. In John chapter 3, it says, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. He was a member of the Sanhedrin. The same came to Jesus by night, when other people wouldn't see him, wouldn't know that he was there. He came when the tabloid people were gone. Same came to Jesus by night and said unto him, Rabbi, we know that thou art a teacher come from God, for no man can do these miracles that thou doest except God be with him. Oh yes, we know. We're involved intellectually, we know this is true, but we're not committed to you. But beloved, if we're going to be committed to Jesus Christ, it's going to be seen in love and obedience to him. Our loyalty. Of all the apostles, John is known as the apostle of, what's the one word you're looking for now? John is known as the apostle of love. John wrote so much about the love of God, the love of Christ. But I want to tell you, I don't think any apostle wrote more per line on obedience and loyalty than John did. And he always is linking it to love. For instance, that well-known statement of Jesus that John records in John chapter 14 and verse 15, where Jesus said, if ye love me, what? Keep my commandments. Verse 21, he that hath my commandments and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me, and he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him and will manifest myself to him. Again, it's all based in love. Continuing in verse 23 of John 14 and verse 24. Jesus answered and said unto him, if a man love me, he will keep my words. And my Father will love him, and we will come unto him, and make our abode with him. He that loveth me not keepeth not my sayings, and the word which ye hear is not mine, but the Father's which sent me. Yes, George always told Abigail, I love you, I love you. And Abigail said, well, if you love me, why don't you pick up your socks? You've heard the story, right? If you love, you try to help, you try to obey. And this is the test for us as Christians. John also continues this same theme in his epistles in 1 John chapter 2 and verse 3. And hereby we know that we know him if we what? Keep his commandments. I'm going to just say we could maybe paraphrase that. And hereby we know that we are committed to him. That we are committed to him if we keep his commandments. And then in 1 John chapter 3, verse 22 through 24. And whatsoever we ask, we receive of him. Why do we do that? Because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. But why do we keep his commandments? Because he says, you love me. If you love me, you'll do this. And this is his commandment, that we should believe on the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as he gave us commandment. And he that keepeth his commandments is committed. He that keepeth his commandments is committed. And he that keepeth his commandments dwelleth in him, and he in him. And hereby we know that he abideth in us by the Spirit which he hath given us. There is a trail that runs from Springer Mountain in Georgia to Mount Katahdin in Maine. And it's known as the Appalachian Trail. About 2,200 miles of up and down, over rocks and around. And just a small portion of it goes through West Virginia. There's a little bit down in southern West Virginia and then up around Harper's Ferry. It crosses just barely into West Virginia. But it has some magnificent views on it. You can just get some really nice views like this at McAfee Knob in Virginia, near Roanoke. But there's another trail on the west part of our country called the Pacific Crest Trail. And it runs all the way from the Mexican border to the border in Canada. Goes through the Sierra Mountains and some of that area, and it's absolutely a beautiful piece of terrain also. Here's one of the views off of that you can see part of the PCT on, and it's quite nice. But there's another trail. And this one maybe you haven't heard of, but this is the CDT. The CDT. It's called the Continental Divide Trail, and it basically just follows the Continental Divide all the way down. So you figure you're probably up high about all the time. Not much low on it, especially at least up high, up in the northern part. Well, I've never hiked really any of the CDT yet. I've hiked on some very small portions of the PCT, and I've hiked several hundred miles of the AT, but I've never really hiked the CDT yet. However, I've been by part of it because I've been by the Continental Divide a few times. And one of those places is in Yellowstone National Park. And there's a lake there, right on the Continental Divide. It's called Lake Issa. So this is a picture of Lake Issa. It's on the Continental Divide in Yellowstone National Park. And the water falls in the rain and goes into the lake. But this is a unique lake. Now you understand the Continental Divide is like the dividing line of the continent as a watershed. We're not talking about a line that arbitrarily or magically goes through the middle and divides the continent in two halves. This is a watershed. The rain on the east side of the Continental Divide all ends up flowing into the Atlantic Ocean in one form or another, either directly in the Atlantic or into the Gulf of Mexico to the Atlantic. Everything on the western part of the Continental Divide flows into the Pacific Ocean. Eventually, it goes into a stream. But here at Lake Issa, you have water in this lake. But unlike a lot of lakes, there's two outlets. And they're small little streams. The lake just sort of sits there, has a little bit of water in it. But the raindrops that stop on this side of the lake go to the Atlantic Ocean. And the raindrops that stop on this side of the lake go to the Pacific Ocean. And there are just inches between those raindrops at times. They're so close together. But yet they end up in vastly different places. Do you see where I'm going with this? Sometimes it appears to us that being involved and being committed are almost the same thing. And they may indeed appear to be so. And they may be very close until we are tried, until the trouble comes, until that pastor gets out of line, or whatever happens. And, we are tested and we are tried. But we're all going to end up in either God's ocean or Satan's ocean. Right? And we need to make a decision, because sometimes it seems like just such a little bit of difference. You could be over here on God's side, but Satan's blowing, trying to blow the winds of strife and persecution over, so that when you fall, when the rain falls, it ends up on his side and goes into his ocean of despair, his ocean of death. But God says, choose life. But when he says to choose life, when he says that we are to make this decision, we are to follow him, he wants a commitment from our lives. And he wants it not just today, when I make a commitment. If I've never made a commitment to Jesus Christ, he wants me to do that today. But he wants me to keep that commitment and to stay to it. Because Jesus said, he that endureth unto what? The end, the same shall be saved. That's what I need today. I preached this to you today because this is what I needed. And if it's what I needed, it might just be what you needed too today. But I want to follow Jesus all the way, beloved. I don't want to let anything keep me from Jesus. And I'm determined to follow Jesus. I'm determined no matter what else happens. And I want you to be determined that no matter what happens, there may be a day that I do something very, very hurtful. And I'm not trying to, but maybe I do. Don't let me keep you from Jesus. Don't let someone else keep you from Jesus. Don't let whoever the president is keep you from Jesus. Don't let whatever the government does keep you from Jesus. Make the commitment. Keep the commitment. Love the commitment. Love the one you make it to. And may God bless you lots and lots and lots.